Today on the menu, I'm making meatballs with a Mexican flair. So it's a mole sauce, which I guess mole means sauce in Mexican. But this has nice warming spices like cinnamon and clove, and what else do I have? Chili powder and black pepper. So it has that warming feeling and that warming quality that we look for this time of year. So there are a few steps to this. First is to make the sauce. So to start off, I have about 2 teaspoons of clarified butter. You could use oil. And I have 1 medium onion, which I'm going to let fry until it's softened. The nice thing about this recipe, you can use any kind of ground meat. It does ask for ground pork. Today I'm going to use ground moose. I strongly believe in eating things that are grown locally, and those are the best foods for you. So the best foods for you are the foods that come from the ground that you walk on. So anything within the vicinity of where you live is probably the best foods for you. So I'm going to be using moose as my meat. But we're going to start with the sauce first, and then we'll move to the next part, which is making the meatballs. After the onions have softened, it's time to put in the spice mixture. So here I have, and I have to read it because I keep forgetting, a clove of garlic. I have 2 teaspoons of chili powder, half a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground cloves, and a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. So I'm going to mix that in with the onions, and I'm just going to stir that around for about 30 seconds. Another bit of spice, so I have 1 tablespoon of unsweetened cocoa powder, 2 tablespoons of raisins, and 1 tablespoon of sesame seeds. So this will go in, and we're going to mix this around for a couple of minutes. We also add a tablespoon of tomato paste. I'm going to stir this around for 2 minutes. Next, we add half a cup of stock, chicken stock or water, and 3/4 of a cup of tomato sauce. And then 2 tablespoons of almond butter. We stir this really well to combine everything together. Once everything's well combined, we're going to let this simmer on low, watching it and stirring it from time to time for about 10 minutes, just to let all those flavors blend really nicely. It already smells really good. While this is simmering, we're going to make our meatballs. So I have about 1.5 pounds of ground meat. So like I mentioned before, I'm using ground moose meat. And then we're going to add, it's 1 teaspoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of coriander. So I'm going to add that to my meat. Then I got to get my hands dirty. My clean hands, should I say. Mix that all around. Once that's nicely mixed, it's time to actually make the meatballs. So I'm going to make some meatballs. Okay, so my meatballs are done, and that basically took no time at all. While the sauce is cooking, you can make your meatballs, no problem. So what I've done here is I've placed the sauce in a wide-mouthed mason jar, just because I'm going to use my emulsifier and blend it a little bit more. So once the sauce is nicely blended, we're going to pour it back into the pan. I'll turn the heat back on, low. Then I'm going to carefully place the meatballs into the sauce. I've covered the pan, and it's going to gently simmer for about 10 minutes. So today I'm serving this with a wilted cabbage and with some basmati rice. So what I like to do with my rice is I like to place a bit of seaweed in it, and while it cooks, all of the minerals that come from the seaweed get emulsified in with the rice, because our diets are very low in minerals because of our soil that's been depleted over time. So this is a great way to add minerals to your diet, is to add a little bit of seaweed, and then once the rice is cooked, I'll just kind of break up the seaweed into the rice, and it almost looks like just a little bit of pepper. So that will cook while the rest of our supper is cooking. Now I have cabbage that came from my garden, so again, I'm eating locally when I can. If not, you can go to your local farmer's market and buy some fresh cabbage from there. I have some extra virgin olive oil in my pan. Always careful not to allow that oil to come to a smoking point. So I'm just going to gently let that heat up. In the meantime, I'm going to slice my cabbage really thinly. So I'm going to place my cabbage now in the heated oil. I'll add some salt. And some pepper. I'm going to let this cook for about maybe 10 minutes until the cabbage gets a bit wilted. So the cabbage has cooked very nicely. I'm going to put that aside, and we're going to have a look at the meatballs. So this has been cooking nicely. So you want to wait until the meatballs have formed nice and firmly before you start to stir, because otherwise they're going to fall apart. So now that the meatballs are nice and firm, I'm going to stir it around a little bit just to cover all of it nicely with some sauce. I'm going to cover this again for 5 more minutes. So this is finally ready. It smells delicious. So I have my basmati rice, this lovely cabbage, and cabbage is part of the cruciferous family, and the cruciferous family of vegetables, which are broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprout, collards, and kale, are considered a cancer-fighting food. So try to include that into your diet as much as you can. And now for the pièce de résistance is our meatballs. So these have cooked for a total of maybe 15 or 20 minutes. You want to make sure that the meatballs are cooked through. That looks good. It is delicious. So this is a great family meal that you can make. It takes no time, really. The sauce takes about 10 or 15 minutes. While that's cooking, you're making your meatballs, and then you're putting it back in to finish off, which takes another 15-20 minutes. So you're looking about 40 minutes, 45 minutes for a meal, which if you go to a restaurant, you're waiting that long sometimes to be served. So a good meal to have at home with your family. I hope you enjoy.